The month of September started with a new Dokkan Fest introducing a whole new category into the game, Hybrid Saiyans. And let me tell you, that team was probably one of the best the game had ever known. Unlike the Shadow Dragon Saya category or the Fusion Dance category, that team had options. Like all the Gotans, Trunks and Gohans were on it, as well as all the Gotenkses. And you remember when I said that INT LR Gohan and Physical Super Saiyan Trunks was like in theory the best rotation in the game, but there just weren't any team at the time where you could run them together? Well, guess what? You now could under Strength Gohan's new leader skill. So that alone pushed that team to the top. But what really sealed the deal was how good Gohan was. He led the Hybrid Saiyans category for Tricky, 170% HP and defense, and 130% attack. So he gave 20% less attack than Gogeta or Omega, but 20% more HP and defense, which was seen by most people at the time as like a worse trade-off. Like I said multiple times, attack was pretty much the only thing that mattered at the time. But luckily for him, the two Hybrid Saiyans LRs were already hitting so hard that if you had them, it just didn't matter. But the keyword is if. Because yes, honestly most people didn't have them at the time. As a matter of fact, the team was only phenomenal if you were a well. Like as a free-to-play player, the team was still great, like you had options, but all the good options were premium units. And not just regular Dokkan Fests. You needed multiple LRs to really like get the best out of this team. But yeah, if you did, that team was just unstoppable. Like literally you just couldn't lose. Gohan also stacked attack on Super, which I guess compensated for the lack of attack on his leader skill with his 120% star for an attack buff. He also had a medium chance to guard, which obviously nowadays is like complete garbage, but at the time this wasn't half bad since his team was already pretty tanky. So this was literally just like a little bonus that could happen every once in a while. Like bro, this guy gave 50% defense to super class allies. His team was just so tanky. Like this was for sure the best defensive team in the game. But there was just another problem that even Wells couldn't escape from. That guy's link set was just bad. Like he didn't link well with literally any unit in the game, let alone on his own team. Like for even to this day, his best linking partner is Tech Gohan, whom he only shares 5 links with. So yeah, that was kind of a bummer for a super type unit category leader with such a good team, full of great synergies. Gohan also came with a new physical boot tanks, who was genuinely like a very good unit at the time. He could steal on Super, an ability that actually just got better with time as you'll see, but not only that. He was I think the first ever extreme physical unit to be able to steal, or honestly just the first viable extreme class unit to be able to steal. So that meant that you could actually run him on physical Omega's team, probably the best extreme class team at the time. Honestly just the extreme physical type as a whole was crazy at the time.
It's insane. Omega is so fucking good. Yes, like extreme physical, it's absolutely mind-boggling that you're gonna be able to put this guy on a physical cooler team. Like, there's no debate anymore at that point that extreme physical will be the best team in the game, I think. Like, it's absolutely insane how good Omega is.
But yeah, this guy was also a debuffer, reducing the defense of super class enemies by 50% and gaining 100% attack at the start of turn. So he could also do some decent damage. His link set was pretty meh honestly, just like not as bad as Gohan's, but still not the greatest link set. Like you weren't activating something like over in a flash on a villain team, you know, which was like his only key link. But other than that, he was pretty solid. Fun fact, but if you remember exactly a year before on September 1st, 2016, we had the awakening of the SR Strength boot tanks alongside Ing Wuhan, who could also steal on Super. So this guy was kind of like the upgraded version of his 2016 counterpart. As for Strength Gohan's banner, it honestly wasn't the greatest banner, like it wasn't bad. It featured some decent characters. It's just that Dokkan Fest on the banner didn't really work that well with Gohan. But to be fair, no characters at the time paired well with him. His banner also came with a new SR Ultimate Gohan, who wasn't good at all. Like sure, for an SR he was okay, but those days were gone. He was mainly just used as SA fodder for his Dokkan Fest counterpart. 3 days later, they released the first ever special category banner. A banner that exclusively featured characters of a specific category. Something that they couldn't really do with Gogeta or Omega, since their teams were so limited. But yeah, the banner wasn't half bad. It had your typical 3 rounds of discounted guaranteed SSR multis and some decent filler SSRs. Like nothing crazy, but enough to make a team that could easily breeze through most Dokkan events. This banner also came with some new awakenings. Physical Super Saiyan through Teen Gohan was actually pretty decent. He greatly raised his attack on Super for 1 turn and gave all allies on rotation 35% attack and defense, making him pretty much the best unconditional support type unit in the game. You couple that with his decent link set, and that guy was exactly the type of unit you wanted on Gohan's Hybrid Saiyan team. A week later, they teased the update 3.7.0. They were going to do some UI changes like dividing the event tab into different categories, adding a shortcut to the Baba shop in the main menu, and letting you see the uncropped version of a part of a unit's kit. So some decent quality of life changes. The next day, they released an Autumn Harvest special login bonus campaign, giving some Dragon Stones, Awakening medals, support and training items. Another day later, and it was already time for a new campaign. It came with your typical login bonus campaign, so there was actually 2 login bonus campaigns running at the same time, which I think was a first if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, we also got some new luxury missions where players could get up to 7 stones by awakening characters. The Dokkan event stages would also have their Super 2 stage stamina cost cut in half for the duration of the campaign. Because yes, if you didn't know, the Super 2 stage had a stamina cost of 50 at the time. And they also announced a bunch of new banners that would be coming in the following days. At the same time, they also released the update 3.7.0, which added the UI changes I talked about earlier. The next day, they released another Dull Race banner, which by that time you already know meant a new LR, as well as some new awakenings. LR Trunks and Goten introduced a new type of leader skill, giving 4 key and 100% HP attack and defense to Super AGL characters, and 2 key and 70% HP attack and defense to Extreme AGL characters. So this was the first unit ever to have a 4 key leader skill, which as you could guess was pretty powerful. But now that the category leaders were at 10, it wasn't all that impressive. Nonetheless, they came with a new super attack mechanic, where each of their supers had 2 variations and it was completely based on RNG. Their 12 key was a 50% coin flip, where they could transform into fat Gotenks and lower their own attack by 30% for 1 turn, or skinny Gotenks where they could lower both their attack and defense by 30% for 1 turn. So yeah, as you would guess, their 12 keys sucked if you cared about defense. Like, it was actually so bad that some people were literally not activating the 5 additional they had on their hidden potential system just to avoid them proccing their 12 key. As for their 18 key, it was much better. They had a 70% chance of turning into Super Saiyan Gotenks and raising their defense by 30% for 1 turn, and 30% chance of turning into Super Sentry Gotenks and raising their attack and defense by 50% for 1 turn, which was insane if you did manage to hit it. As for their passive, well, it was also based on RNG. They randomly gained between 3 to 9 key at the start of turn, which was actually very helpful since you absolutely wanted them to hit their 18 key super attack. And with that 120% attack buff on super, best believe that these guys were hitting hard. Like, they were probably one of the hardest hitting units at the time. And the crazy part was, they were on the Hybrid Saiyan team. So the Hybrid Saiyan team now had 3 LRs, and like I said numerous times already, summonable LRs pretty much gapped the whole game at the time. So being able to run 3 of them on a single team meant that this team was pretty much the best one in the game. Like, nothing could even come close to it if you had all of the Hybrid Saiyan summonable LRs. Like, this was truly one of the strongest teams the game had ever known. I think that the only reason nobody's talking about it is because, well, I'm pretty sure that even the biggest wells at the time couldn't run it. Like, summonable LRs were almost a myth. Not only were the rates horrendous at the time, those banners didn't even have guaranteed SSRs. And you were better off summoning on Dokkan Fest banners anyways because of their better leader skills and free multi discounts during big celebrations. Anyways, their link set sucked. Like, just try to guess who their best linking partner is today. A character that only shares 5 links with them, by the way. LR Pajama Virus. Like, bro, LR Pajama Virus. That's just crazy. Thank God they had an insane amount of key in their passive. Otherwise, this would have just been so bad. The other funny thing about them is that even though they could fuse into Gotenks in both their 18 and 12 key supers, they weren't on the fusion category. At least not at the time. I know they got added to it like a year or 2 years ago, I don't remember anymore, but at the time they only had 2 categories. The World Tournament category, which wasn't a real team, and Hybrid Saiyans, which was obviously insane. So yeah, people were mad, since it didn't make any sense for them not to be on the fusion category. And they were right, hence why they got added to it like 5 years later. Now, for the Awakenings. Agel's per Vegeta was actually not bad. He raised his attack by 30% on super for 9 turns, and gave 2 key and 25% attack and defense to Agel's strength and physical type allies. But people were very disappointed with him at the time, mainly because he was a super Vegeta, and that the final flash was such like an iconic moment, so they really wanted him to be like insane and not just like a super type unit. And the fact that his link set kind of sucked didn't help either. Like, Z Fighters and Soul vs Soul were pretty much just dead links by that time. Strength percent Goku was actually a little bit better. He greatly raised his attack by 50% on super, had a 90% start of turn attack buff, a better link set, and the ability to survive KO attacks when above 20% HP, which was actually a much better ability at the time, since bosses back then didn't like attack a billion times in the same slot, so it was quite common for a boss to have his last or only attack to be a super attack, so this ability was actually quite useful. The same day they also released the first banner of a new series of banners, where they would bring back old Dokkan Fests of a certain type. I don't know why they waited for the category meta to start dropping those types of monotypes banners. This would have been like much more valuable during the monotype meta, but yeah, the physical type banner was not great. Like the 3 featured Dokkan Fests weren't all that anymore, but if you needed some filler Dokkan Fest on Omega's team, they weren't bad options by any means, and probably better off than most summonable units. They also put a notice on the news saying that a bug regarding the Sentaroshi Kai had been fixed. Apparently you were able to play him. I couldn't find anything else about it, but yeah, you could somehow manage to use him on a team, which probably didn't do anything and just crashed the game or something. 3 days later, we had another special Dokkan Fest type banner featuring Agel Super Vegito, Agel Rose, and Agel Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken Goku. So honestly, not a bad banner, but all of these characters just didn't have a category yet, so no point really on chasing them at the time. Another 3 days later, and they released the Strength variant of that banner with an even worse pool of characters. Like Strength Omega was pretty much dead now outside of mono strength teams because of physical Omega. Strength Broly was literally a unit that you could baba if you had Strength LR Broly. That's how useless he was. And even if you didn't have the LR, he was only really good on the World Tournament. As for Strength percentric Vegeta, well, he was actually phenomenal, but people didn't know that at the time, since defense wasn't as valuable yet, and that guy pretty much did no damage. But his time will come. The next day it was announced in the news that Dokkan would be a part of the Tokyo Game Show that year. And bro, I did some research and found literal gold.
My name is Toshi, and I'm from Bandai Namco Entertainment, Japan, and I'm the producer of Dragon Ball Z Dokkan Battle.
I found an old interview of Toshi while he was the producer of Dokkan. Not from the Tokyo Game Show, but from the Anime Expo a month prior. I'll leave the link in the description, but he did drop some gems during that video. Like, guess what? Toshi's favorite character is Vegito Blue. So if you're wondering why half of Legends Anniversaries had some type of Vegito involved, well, you kind of got your answer. It's probably also why Vegito's characters were so broken in Dokkan at the time, and why Vegito cards actually started to suck as soon as he left. But yeah, coming back to the Tokyo Game Show, they held like a little retweet campaign where players could receive up to 21 stones, so not bad at all. Unfortunately, to balance things out, they had to release a World Tournament the next day with some new awakenings, and funnily enough, the new World Tournament trophy card was none other than Vegito. Coincidence? I think not. Agel Kid Goku was okay, I guess. He had 70% attack and defense at the start of turn, and a 10% chance of turning into a giant ape. Like, he was low-key better than the Agel Great Ape Vegeta, who was a summonable character. Jackie-chan was the first ever World Tournament leader, leading that category for 3k and 70% HP attack and defense. Like, this was insane for a free-to-play leader. Like, sure, the team wasn't all that at the time, but still, the leader skill buff was impressive. As for his kit, he could steal on Super, which was insane. Had a 70% attack and defense at the start of turn, and had the exact same ability as Strength percent Goku. He could survive a KO attack when above 20% HP. Like, bro, this guy was just insane for a free-to-play card. Like, the only bad thing about this guy was his Link set, which on a Dragon Ball Saga team wasn't that bad, but obviously that category didn't exist yet, and the characters from that saga just weren't meta relevant at the time. Physical Kami. We'll talk about his easy on due time, but his TOR wasn't bad. I would even dare to say that he was actually good. He greatly lowered defense on Super, which was still a decent ability at the time, and gave all allies 2k and 25% attack and defense. So you could generally run this guy as a filler unit on something like Omega's team. Like, sure, his Link set sucked, but the support made up for it, I guess. Agel Vegito was also not bad. He raised all allies attack by 20% on Super for one turn, had 100% defense at the start of turn, and gave an additional 30% attack to Super Class allies on rotation. Like, he was decent, but I expected better from Toshi's favorite card, you know. Okay, well, jokes aside, from what I could gather, people just went ham for him on the World Tournament because, yeah, he was, well, Vegito, you know. And since he was still an SSR, I think people had high hopes for his future awakening. They also added 2 new SRs to the World Tournament banner. SR Yamcha was trash and not even worth going over. SR Ranfan was also trash, but she was the first ever Peppy Girls leader, so I guess worth pointing out as a fun fact. The next day, they released the INT type Dokkan Fest banner, which honestly wasn't a good banner at the time. Like, I guess the characters were still okay, like Wuhan was still decent, Blue Vegeta, but In Geneva got replaced by his strength counterpart 3 days later, and they dropped a new Universal Survival Saga banner, featuring 4 new characters. Angel Fit Boo was not bad. He had a 20% chance of starting the attack enemy for 2 turns on Super, an 80% start of turn attack buff, and an additional 40% attack and defense for 7 turns for the start of turn. So for his first 7 turns, he had a 100% attack buff. So yeah, this guy could do some decent damage. Tech MVP 17 was also not bad. He raised his attack by 50% on Super for 6 turns, had 50% attack and defense at the start of turn, and gained an additional 12% attack per tech key spheres obtained. So I think this was the first nuker ever to have both an attack buff on Super and at the start of turn. So yeah, best believe that this guy was dishing out some decent numbers at that time. Strength Topo was just like the other two, not a bad card. He raised Super Class Allies attack by 25% on Super, which was weird because people expected him to be like an Extreme Class character, but no, he actually debuffed Extreme Class enemies defense by 50% and raised Super Class Allies attack and defense by 30% at the start of turn. So as a support type unit, this guy wasn't bad. His link set was just horrible at the time, since he was the only Pride Trooper card and one of the very few units to have the Tournament of Power key link. But those issues were fixed with time. Physical Boragama was probably the worst card of the bunch at the time. Like, sure, he raised his defense by 30% on Super for 6 turns and had a 10% chance of turning into a giant ape at the start of turn when below 80% HP, but his link set absolutely sucked and the attack buff just took too long to ramp up. Like, he had to get hit 6 times to max out his passive. It was still okay though, just not as good as the other cards. They also dropped a new story event featuring a new farmable free-to-play unit. Physical Goku was the first ever Universal Survival Saga leader, meaning that this team was officially a team, and that at some point in time, a new summonable character was going to lead that category. But as for the card itself, it was not good at the time. Like, he was only an SR, and even though he gave Tsuki to Universe Survival Saga category allies, that category was extremely limited at the time. So for now, he kind of sucked. They also at the time released the Tech Type Dokkan Fest banner, which was actually not bad. Like, Tech Gotenks were still very good if you didn't have his physical counterpart, and Tech Golden Frieza was a super bad word monster, as you'll see later on. It wasn't something worth summoning for. You were probably just better off saving your stones for category leaders. Talking about category leaders, they teased the next Dokkan Fest a day later, and it looked like it was going to be a new Angel Frieza. The next day, they actually added the battlefield medals into the Baba shop. You could actually now get them with green gems. So this was, I guess, good news for new players who pulled LR Gohan and still couldn't awaken him. At the same time, they also announced a new login bonus campaign, a Dragon Ball Super anime login bonus campaign, and some sort of exclusive Google Play cashback campaign. So something crazy was right around the corner. So they really wanted to make it look like buying stones was like a good deal. Even though it honestly never is. The following day, they dropped the new Dokkan Fest. INT Angel Golden Frieza led the Resurrected Warriors category for Tricky 120% HP and 170% attack and defense, or the INT type for Tricky and 50% HP attack and defense. The Resurrected Warriors category was actually pretty good. It had 2 summonable LRs, all the Kid Boos, Perfect Cells, and Angels per Century Gokus, and the crazy part is that this guy was the first leader to give 170% attack, so you already know that offensively his team was insane. He himself was actually quite good offensively. He had an immense damage multiplier with a 150% start of turn attack buff. This was an insane start of turn attack buff, but unfortunately to balance things out, they made it so that his debuff not only applied to superclass enemies but also your superclass allies. This actually did hurt you if you were going to run a unit like Super Saiyan 3 Angel Goku on your team. Plus the guy only had 2 key links, with one of them being pretty much non-existent on his team, and that 50% defense was quite low. Like, sure, it didn't matter much on release, but trust me, it became a problem real quick. As for his banner, well, it was actually quite decent. It featured both Kid Boos, who were still not bad units, Tech Golden Frieza, who like I said earlier became like a super bad world beast, INT Middle Cooler, who was still a decent support type unit, Physical Full Power Frieza, who I guess could still put out some okay numbers even though he wasn't on the Resurrected Warriors category, and Tech Angel Goku, who was still like very good and only got better with time. Like, I genuinely think this guy was better at the end of the year than he was on release, but you'll see. Frieza's Dokkan event also came with a new farmable character, who was actually not bad. He lowered attack on Super, had 3k and 50% attack and defense for 7 turns for a surf turn, and shared 6 links with INT Angel Golden Frieza, making him his best linking partner. Around that time, they added some new stages to the Universal Survival Saga story event, which added 3 new farmable characters. Strength Angel Golden Frieza was a decent free-to-play unit. He raised his attack by 50% for 3 turns on Super, had 40% attack and defense at the start of turn, and 4 key and 40% attack when facing 2 or more enemies. Unfortunately, you would rarely see the second part of his passive at the time, but when you were able to proc it, he was actually quite good for a free-to-play unit. Tekurin was, I guess, okay. Like, she had 3k at the start of turn, could stun the attacked enemy on both her super and passive, while also debuffing the attacked enemy attack and defense by 50%. SR Ultimate Gohan was just not great, and pretty much just used as SA fodder for the other Ultimate Gohans, especially the Dokkan Fest one, for those who were patient enough to wait.